Hello, bonjour, welcome back to another revision video. This one's for GCSE Geography Population AQA specification. So I'm going to start with a few keywords. Natural increase is when the birth rate is higher than the death rate. Natural decrease is when the death rate is higher than the birth rate. Birth rate is the number of births per thousand, and death rate is number of deaths per thousand. And migration is the movement of a person from one place to another. Urbanization is the increase in the number of people living in a city or a town. So you've probably seen this before. This is the demographic transition model, which shows the birth rate and death rate and the total population of different countries. Now, in stage 1, there is a reasonably high birth rate and death rate. There is a slow increase in natural increase, and the reasons for a high birth rate is that there are many children needed for farming, and many children die at an early age due to many diseases or no clean water, as well as poor sanitation. Some people believe that contraception is against any religious beliefs, and there's also no awareness of family planning. Now, reasons for high death rate is that there's a lot of disease, famine, a lack of medical knowledge. And in stage 2, examples are Egypt, Kenya and India. The death rate falls rapidly, but the birth rate still remains high. Now, there is a very rapid increase in natural increase, and again, reasons for birth rate is, children needed for child labour on the farm, poor sanitation, dirty water, so children die at an early age, no awareness of family planning or contraception, which also goes against religious beliefs. Now, in stage 3, an example would be Brazil, where the birth rate starts to fall and the death rate continues to fall slowly, and the natural increase slows down. And the reasons for a drop in birth rate is that there's an awareness of medical knowledge. So there's improved medical care and diet, and there are fewer children needed for child labour. And the reasons for continuous drop in death rate is because there are improvements in medical care, in water supply and sanitation, so again, fewer children die. Now, in stage 4, the birth rate and death rate remain very low, and there is a slow natural increase. An example would be USA, Japan, France and the UK. And so the reasons for a low birth rate is because there's awareness of contraception, family planning, there's good health, good sanitation, access to clean water. Emancipation of women means that women, obviously, they work, they have an education, so they focus on careers and jobs before, having children, settling down. And there are also later marriages. And there's also a low death rate because there's a good healthcare and a reliable food supply. Now, the reasons for birth rate and death rate are the same for countries in stage 5, such as Germany, where the birth rate is actually very, very low. It's lower than the death rate, so there is actually a natural increase in Germany, and the death rate also remains low, so there's a slow decrease in natural increase, purely because, there's a natural increase, and the total population starts to fall. So this is the population graph. My wonderful drawing here. This wouldn't actually come up in an exam, but it's a good way to remember population, basically. So the tap here represents birth rate, so this is a child being born. And the plug here represents death rate, so being washed away. Now the water inside the bath represents the population, and the little people in here are the people that contribute to the population, if that makes sense. Now, the overflowing water basically represents overpopulation, and a rising water level shows an increase in population, whereas a lowering in water level, decreasing water level, would show a decrease in population. So this is a population pyramid for an LEDC. Examples of LEDCs would be Bangladesh and Ethiopia. So as you can see, there's a triangular shape with a wide base. This represents a very high birth rate, as there is an unawareness of contraception and children are needed for labour. There's also a high fertility rate, as there is no family planning and again, children are needed for labour. It's quite narrow at the top, so as you can see, there's a high death rate due to poor sanitation, no medication, many diseases and no fresh water. On the other hand, there is population periods for MEDCs as well. For example, the United Kingdom, where, as you can see, the base is very narrow, as there's a smaller birth rate, as there's an awareness of contraception, family planning, later marriages, emancipation of women. And obviously, as you can see, the age range is also much more higher than those of an MEDC, as people live longer, and yeah, so there are too many old people to support who depend on the economically active population, elderly dependents, and this massive wide thingy mabobby here represents the large economically active population from the baby boom. So, managing rapid population growth. Firstly, what actually causes rapid population growth? Well, there's limited access to family planning and contraception. There's also a need of children for labour. Also, children care for younger children and elderly family members, and there are high infant mortality rates in LEDCs, so women have many children to ensure many survive through adulthood. Economic effects are that there are not enough jobs for the whole population, so unemployment rates increase, and there is also increased poverty as children are born into families that are already poor. There are some political effects as well, as the population is mainly made up of young people, so policies mainly focus on young people for things such as education and childcare. There are fewer older people, so policies focus on less things such as pensions. Social effects include that healthcare and education services cannot cope with rapid increase in population, so not everyone can access it. Also, children do not receive education as they have to look after families, and there are not enough houses, so families are placed into overcrowded settlements, which leads to health problems as there are no sewers connected to the house and no access to clean water. So, an example of a case study for managing rapid population, which I'm certain you must be doing, in school, which is China's one-child policy. So the policy was introduced in 1979 to control the 1960s and 70s population so as to produce a sustainable amount of food and resources for the population. Exceptions include people in rural areas can have more than one child to make the population there more sustainable, and couples can have more than one child if their first is a girl, so as to have a boy who works on a farm, which actually is quite sexist because I don't believe a girl strong enough to work on a farm. But hey ho, what happens if they stick to the policy? Well, there are quite a few benefits, as there's free education for the child, priority housing for the family, there's a 5 to 10% salary rise, and they receive 50 yuan per month after 60 years of not violating it, which if you convert it to UK currency is only £13 a month, but still better than nothing, as I still get pension anyway. And what happens if people don't stick to the policy? Well, there's a massive fine, which is called a social maintenance fee. They're forced to abort the child in the 9th month. There's a 10% salary cut. That women get kidnapped, and there's a lack of funding for education or healthcare. So, positive social effects of this is that the annual growth rate fell from 2.23% in 1970 to 0.63% in 2005. There are 400 million fewer deaths. Population growth slowed down sufficiently, which means there's no lack of jobs or food, and the standard of living increases due to millions pulled out of poverty and less unemployment. However, negative social effects include female infanticide, where girls are killed, a gender imbalance of 100 girls to 130 boys. There are also forced abortions in the 9th month, and only children have a reputation for being overindulged. Positive economic effects include increasing wealth in China so that couples can afford to pay the social maintenance fee, and you receive 50 yuan a month if you haven't violated the policy for 60 years. Negative economic effects include, well, just no pensioning system. Another case study, which is a non-birth control policy, which again manages rapid population, is Indonesia's transmigration policy. So key facts is that, as I said, it's a non-birth control policy, unlike the one-child policy. The population is 240 million, but it is undistributed, and approximately 130 million people live on the island of Java, but they moved to island in the archipelago, which is made up of 17,500 islands, such as West Papua. Economic effects is that redistributed poverty rather than reducing it, and resettlement costed $7,000 per family in the 1980s. Also, families can now grow crops, which contributes to their income. Crops. Settlements are poorly planned. There's a lack of shops, roads, water, sanitation, electricity. And finally, migrants lack farming skills, so they cannot make productive use of their land, and some abandon homes and become refugees. Social effects include traditional land rights ignored as land ownership is granted to migrants. There's also religious clashes between Islamist migrants and Christian locals. There are also clashes between migrants and the indigenous population. In 2001, for example, hundreds died when local Dayaks and trans-migrant Majorese clashed. Environmental effects include an increased rate of deforestation in previously sparsely spaced areas. There's also poor land use practices such as overcultivation, which leads to soil erosion. And finally, political effects. It's apparently encouraged by the government simply to increase national security and control indigenous people in the outer islands. Thousands of people were displaced from Java to Kalimantan after the eruption of Mount Merapi in 2010. 2,000 families took the offer of free transportation, 2 hectares of land, and 6-month living costs. So now, aging population. An aging population impacts on future development. Population pyramid of a country with an aging population is usually a stage 5 country such as France. Elderly people are supported by the economically active population and become dependent on them. There is a higher proportion of dependent people, which is economic and social effects, thus leading to affecting the future development of the country. Social effects include healthcare services are under pressure to provide for more elderly people who need medication. Also, family members become unpaid carers, so working population has become more stressed as they have no leisure time. Also, more elderly people means there's less pension money, so people retire later. Economic effects. The country's economy grows more slowly, so less money is spent on things to help the country grow, such as schools. Instead, money is spent on things that don't help the country grow, such as retirement homes. The working population pay taxes and is spent by the government to pay state pensions and for services such as healthcare and retirement homes. As a result, taxes go up. So a case study for an aging population is France's pronatalist policy. Some background information to this is that the Code de la Famille was introduced to encourage birth rate increase. It was also introduced to produce a more suitable age range and dependency ratio, as well as to have a natural increase in contrast to the current natural decrease. France had the second highest birth rate in Europe, which is a huge investment and has had the biggest baby boom since the 1980s. Incentives used by the policy. Rail fare is subsidised, which means it's made cheaper. Council houses are allocated after the third child. There's also free child-orientated development available, such as nurseries. You also get, the couple get 1,400 euros of the third child, and mothers receive early maternity leave from 20 weeks onwards. There's also full tax benefits as well as 100% mortgage, which is another incentive in order to control the socio-economic implications of an aging population. So now moving on to migration. Some key words are, emigration is when people leave an area. Immigration is when people move into an area. So if I was living in Italy, for example, and I moved to China, I would be emigrating from Italy as I'm leaving that area, and I'm immigrating into China as I'm moving into that area. Migration is the movement of a person from one place to another. Push factors are factors causing someone to move away from a place, for example, unemployment. Pull factors are factors causing someone to move to a country, for example, high wages. The source country is where the migration starts, so, from my example, Italy would be the source country as I've moved out of that place, and the host country is a country that a person moves to, so again, China would be the host country as I move into that place. And obstacles are factors stopping a person from entering a country, for example, visas or border force. So, a few examples of pull factors include low income, unemployment, civil war, and famine. Push factors would include a chance of a better quality of life, higher pay, and more education and healthcare services. Positive impacts for the source country. There's less pressure on schools and hospitals, and money is sent back to the country for migrants, remittances. Negative impacts, however, would be a labour shortage as migrants are of working age, skills shortage as highly educated people migrate, and an ageing population. Positive impacts for the host country is that there's increased labour, so young people immigrate to find work, and migrants pay taxes which help to fund services. However, negative impacts for the host country is that locals fight for jobs, which leads to conflict and tension. There's also an increased demand for services, and there's overcrowding in hospitals and schools, for example. So migration within the EU, an example is Poland to the UK. So positive effects for the UK. The rates of people in Catholic churches and schools increase. There are more people paying tax, so the UK can pay for development of services. There are more highly educated people to do highly skilled jobs, and the UK becomes much more multicultural because, Polish people open Polish shops, or there may be some Polish festivals, for example. However, negative effects for the UK is that there are too many people to provide for, i.e. giving out benefits or healthcare. Many migrants send money back home to Poland, so there's not enough tax being paid, and some migrants do not pay tax. And there are not enough jobs or homes for British people as the Polish migrants have taken them. However, there are some positive effects for Poland as well, as more jobs and homes become available for local people, and many remittances are sent from the UK as the UK pound is worth a lot of Polish currency, which I think was zloty. I don't know how to pronounce it, but anyway, so negative effects for Poland. There are many highly skilled people which move away from Poland, so Poland suffers from a brain drain. They have to pay more tax as there are less people paying tax, and rates in schools and Catholic churches decrease. Another example of migration is migration to the EU, so from outside the EU to the EU, and an example of this is Sierra Leone to Spain. So migrants usually come to Spain by crossing the Mediterranean Sea from African countries. In 2001, 45,000 emigrants were caught and therefore sent back to Africa as they were refused entry into Spain. These migrants tend to be refugees from wars. An example of this is the civil war in Sierra Leone, which forced 2 million people out of their homes between 1991 and 2002. There are only push factors in Sierra Leone as a result of death and violence. So, impacts in Sierra Leone. The working population becomes reduced, so there is a smaller economically active population, thus causing less contributions to the economy. Families separate when fleeing from wars, and some children become orphans. There are also some impacts in Spain, as there is social tension between locals and immigrants. Unwanted jobs, such as in agriculture, are filled by the unskilled immigrants. Average wages for unskilled workers decrease due to high demand for jobs. Birth rate increases and more tax is paid to contribute to development of the country. So to summarise the population topic, just as a quick quiz, I'll read you out the questions before you pause and have a go at answering the questions. So number 1, what are 2 factors which affect population growth? Number 2, give an example of a country at stage 4 of the demographic transition model. Number 3, define migration. Number 4, give an advantage and disadvantage of the one-child policy. And number 5, give an example of a push and a pull factor of a country. So if you just want to pause so you can have a go answering the questions, and then I'll read them out to you. So here are the answers. 2 factors affecting population growth is birth rate and death rate. Number 2, a country at stage 4 of the DTM is the UK. Number 3, migration, the movement of a person from one place to another. An advantage of the one-child policy is that population growth slows down sufficiently, which means there's no lack of jobs or food. The disadvantage is that there's a gender imbalance of 100 girls to 130 boys. And finally, number 5, a push factor, which is higher pay, and a pull factor, which is civil war. So I hope this video has helped you summarise population and that you feel much more confident for your exam, and just so that you understand the topic much more better. So thank you for watching, and I hope to see you soon.